Good afternoon, fellow Plexers. I'm going to put this right on the screen. Stuart just had a fantastic post that really spoke to me in Plexaholics. So let me just read it. Hi, crew. I have a decent PMS setup thanks to some savvy friends and enjoy collecting and sharing content with them. I like to invest in an off-site redundancy rig to protect me from catastrophic loss since my collection is somewhat sizable and growing. Stuart's not interested in paid online services, and why would he? They're so expensive with large amounts of media data. He'd rather have help in defining what and how a proper hardware setup that's kept at a friend or relative's house that could be arranged to fill his need. Budget is not a primary concern. I love that, Stuart, because it takes money to do great things. Ease in setup and operational reliability are. His current setup involves two Synologies that host content and a PC that runs Plex Media Server. His PC runs Windows, but it could become Linux one day. He has about 80 terabytes of space, and he's using 45 terabytes of that space so far. Now, I don't know how that space breaks down between the two Synology units, but hopefully one could be the backup NAS and one could be the repository of the Plex Media Server files. So if bad things happen, he'd be fine with losing a week or possibly even a month of the past work. Can someone wise and experienced help him with some suggestions? Well, I don't know how wise I am, Stuart, but I've got some experience that might be right up your alley with some possible solutions. More than one. So, first I want to talk about 5 key points. And the first one is a simple change to your Plex server for you and your users. You can see somebody streaming off mine. I have about 50 terabytes of Plex server media. You should go into your account settings if you haven't done this already, as should all of your users, and drop down and enable something that I wish was enabled by default. Sync my watch state and ratings. This should be set to active for you and your users. That way, if something catastrophic happened, things that you've watched will be marked watched again, even if you connect to a friend's server while you're rebuilding and redoing your own. So like this Twilight Zone episode is partially watched. This won't be synced. But if I go in, I always love a sitcom to watch at night before going to bed. So if I go into season 9 and my server disappeared and I had to rebuild and it wasn't up for a week or two, well, it would know what was watched and what wasn't watched because of this account setting. So that should be something you should do for yourself and your friends and family. Make a little PSA video for them and send it to them. I did with my users. So that's the first point I'd like to point out. The second point is kind of tricky because everybody assumes they named their Plex media correctly. Let me go into the right library. So, I have lots of FileBot videos, and I name everything with my custom expression that both the developer of FileBot has helped me fine-tune and other members of this Plexaholic group has helped me fine-tune. Basically, it creates a folder for the movie that has the source ID from TMDB, and if we go into it, it also picks up common edition names in the original file, not everything, but things like remastered, director's cut, uncut, and a few others. So it applies that edition tag automatically, and if you have a Plex Pass feature, the movie scans in properly. So what I do want to point out while we're talking about compliancy is I've done videos on this. I have a couple movies that just won't add unless it's formatted with the source ID. This is a Goldie Hawn and Warren Beatty movie from 1970, simply called Dollar Sign. If I name it just dollar sign space with 1971 in parentheses, Plex won't match it. And Plex won't fix match this unless you include the IMDb TT database number in that process. Well, here's what I want to point out. In the event that you have a catastrophic event and your data survives, let's go to my movie library, and you do have to point all your media at a new, or point a new Plex server at all your media, you weren't lucky enough to have that backed up, well, let's go to year. This is how many movies I have in this library. If the average Plex server owner who's not aware of naming as well as I do, or maybe as well as you do, had to point a new server at their media, and they fix matched 10% of everything they added in their movie library, when you get to this size, that's still 700 movies. How many of those movies won't scan in? How many of those 700 movies will scan as the wrong title? And once this number of movies scan in, how do you find the ones that scanned in as the wrong movie? I mean, you can sort the library by unmatched, but there is no sort for movies that scanned in wrong. Plex doesn't know that. So this is part of an overall strategy in my mind, and I'm probably spending too much time on it, but my solution means I don't have to worry about this. So let's go on further to the next thing. A UPS is wildly important. I'm going to bring up my newer Synology NAS. This is where everything happens. Let's go to the storage. I have 10 bays because there's a DS517 expansion unit connected. The first two bays have two 1 terabyte Western Digital Red SATA SSDs. That's running a RAID 1 BTRFS volume, snapshot protection enabled, and I have my Synology packages and my Docker containers installed on this fast SSD pool. Now this is a recent thing I changed to, I don't know, 5 months ago, 6 months ago. Everything was just a rusty storage volume where the programs and Dockers ran from. The difference it made when opening up Sonar, which is part of the Trash Guides install, was night and day. I could look at my watch and maybe 30 or 45 seconds would pass before the interface popped up. Now it's just instant. So all the data paths point to the rusty volume, but the container configuration points to the SSD volume. It's a night and day difference, and this NAS is just running a 9th gen Intel Celeron processor, and it's great for all my Docker containers. Plex does not run here. I run it off-site, well, on another device locally like you do. So this is my preferred setup. I'm not sure how you're set up, but this is my preferred setup. So if we close this and we go to File Station, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. I had another point to make, and that point was having a UPS on both this unit, the unit running your Plex server, and your backup NAS. So if I go into Control Panel and I go into Hardware and Power and click UPS, my bigger CyberPower UPS is set here. It's connected here with a USB cable. This NAS is set to shut down 2 minutes after power loss, and then it automatically boots up after the power is restored. I have a separate smaller CyberPower UPS connected to my older Synology NAS, which receives a hyper backup from this one. So we'll talk about that in a second. Plex runs on a little Asus NUC with a 14th gen Intel processor. Here's the processor. It's got a fabulous iGPU, way more power than I need because of my gig connection. My media is easy to stream. I have no bottlenecks outgoing. But the UPS component prevents any corruption with running Plex off-site. And I know you probably don't have that with your Plex Media Server running under Windows. So if I go to the NUT UPS tools and I open it up, it just works. I think I have this set to shut down 2 minutes also. So the Synology tells the Unraid device to shut down when the power goes off. So I'm going to stop here. I want to talk about RAID and backup also, but I have to explain how everything works here. So Unraid is installed only as a Docker host install. There is no storage. And the beautiful thing about Unraid is I can create a RAID 1 volume, which they call a cache pool, with both a SATA SSD and a NVMe SSD. So here's a Western Digital Red SATA SSD, 500 gigabytes, and here's a 500 gigabyte Western Digital Red NVMe joined in a RAID 1 BTRFS cache pool. That's Unraid's term. It's just an SSD volume, RAID 1 volume. You see I'm using very little of this. I have 360 gigabytes free, and it's just for these Docker containers to run on. And the way I've got it set up is, in the settings it was easy to do. I have these mounts delayed about 3 or 4 minutes. So this is the mount to my shared folder on my Synology NAS for my Plex media, media-plex. I have another shared folder for channels DVR. So this is a separate mount to that shared folder. This is a test one. So in the event power is restored, the NUC running on RAID has safely shut down once power is lost to the house because of the UPS, just as my Synology NAS is. So once power is restored, the Celeron powered Synology NAS takes longer to boot up and start sharing files than it does for Unraid to boot up and start looking for those shared files. So I delayed this 3 or 4 minutes. It's a setting someplace in Unraid. I have a whole video, a YouTube playlist on this subject. So then under Docker, I slow things down too. So this is a sacrificial container. I wanted something that didn't need any access to my NAS. And this could have been it too, but I installed this recently. So you can reorder how the containers boot up or start. This starts first, and then this 30 seconds is a delay. Not for this container, but the one next. So AdGuard is delayed 30 seconds. And if you keep watching here, Dispatcher is delayed 5 seconds. The Minecraft server is delayed 5 seconds. Tautuli is delayed 5 seconds. Gaps is delayed 30 seconds. FileBot is delayed 30 seconds. This test container is delayed 10 seconds. Channels DVR is delayed 10 seconds. And then Plex is delayed 10 seconds. All told, it takes about 8 minutes for my Plex server to come up. But by then, the Synology is sharing files and everything's fine. And I've had power losses, and I've never had to manually do anything to get Plex back up. If I reboot my Synology NAS and this Unraid server around midnight before going to bed after every Plex server update. So the UPS is important, and honestly, I'm running a test Plex server under Ubuntu right here. I use it for different videos on my channel. I don't know how to do everything I've done under Unraid with a desktop install of Ubuntu. I gave up Windows in 2006. I definitely don't know how to accomplish all that under Windows, but it's easily accomplished under Unraid. So many people don't realize how much corruption can happen with an unclean shutdown, a power loss event. That doesn't happen with my setup. So these are some preliminary things I think it's important to think about before we get into RAID. So you're already using a Synology NAS, which just makes me assume you've got a RAID setup. I really think that once you get over 5 drives, you should not be using RAID 5 or with Synology Hybrid RAID. I think once you're over 5 drives, you should be using RAID 6 or Synology Hybrid RAID 2, which is what I do on both NAS. So RAID is important, and a backup that you don't have to worry about that happens automatically is important too. So if you can split your Synology NASs into two, one primary for your storage and one as a backup, that's easy. That's what I do. So Hyper Backup runs twice a week and backs up everything. Well, not everything. It backs up these two folders. It backs up the Docker folder. This is where all my Trash Guides installs are. And it backs up my Plex Media folder. The rest is just extra stuff for my YouTube channel, for my test servers. That can be recreated easily. And I'm trying to remember, I think I've got Hyper Backup backing up the little bit of DVRing I do from channels DVR. So then we go to the older Synology NAS, which is going to go live off site. This is running SHR2 with one huge rusty volume. You see I've got a little bit less room here, but still plenty to go forward before I have to upgrade drives here. And the Hyper Backup Vault is here with all my files. Now, you'll be faced with the same dilemma I am. Do you want to continue to invest in the Synology ecosystem? Originally, I had planned on buying a DS1825 Plus when they were released, and then just before all the 2025 models were released, Synology came out with a stupid branded hard drive crap. Well, they've since fixed that with DSM 7.3 update. You can use your normal drives again, and I could have migrated my drives in, but if one of my 16 terabyte Iron Wolf Pro drives had died after it was migrated in, I couldn't replace it with that drive. I'd have to buy a Synology branded drive. So I'm still leaning towards the same Synology upgrade, and I push the DS1520 Plus into the backup position and get rid of my DS1019 Plus now that it's received its final DSM update. But I'm thinking about changing things up. Ugreen makes wonderful hardware, and I do have a Ugreen DXP 4800 Plus that I bought in June or July to test. I'm currently running Unraid on it. Probably after the first of the year, I'll reset it to the UGOS. But my problem with that wonderful hardware is I understand they're using a more primitive form of implementation of the BTRFS file system, and that's why they don't have the snapshot option yet. So I'm kind of waiting to see what happens there. If it wasn't for that, I might consider going to a new 8-bay Ugreen NAS, and that way I could eliminate having to run Plex someplace else like you're doing. Now, truth be told, the DS1520 Plus Synology NAS with its 9th gen Intel processor, that has some good hardware acceleration off from that too, and it's more than what I need with my gig fiber access. But this Unraid experiment with a NUC was just that, an experiment, and it worked out so well I just moved my server to it. And that comes into things too, but let's talk about Unraid a little bit more from the backup perspective. So let's go to the newer NAS, and I know this is getting long, but it might all come together. So in my main Plex Media shared folder, all these other ones are for my test servers, but here I have a nested setup that's great for a trash guides install. If I go into the movie library, here's individual movie libraries. Same for the TV show libraries. This allows Sonar to pull shows into separate Plex libraries folders. I prefer my setup over what Unraid suggests, and they never suggest that Sonar or Radar can pull from multiple libraries. The only thing that Radar can't do is it can't pull the same movie into this library and then pull a second version of it into this library. But if you're downloading a stand-up show, Radar can put it here. Your regular movies can be put here, kids movies there, documentaries there, concerts here, and so on. It just can't pull the same movie twice for two different libraries. This nested folder structure kind of goes back to the second point of naming and structuring, especially with a trash guide setup. It's helpful. But on the backup side, if we go back to the main shared folder, I've created a folder called unraid-container-backup, and every Wednesday my unraid NUC shuts down all the containers and backs them up here, because everything in this folder gets backed up twice a week to my older Synology NAS. So my whole unraid setup first goes here. So if the unraid NUC exploded, as soon as I had a replacement device, I could take one of my old 8th gen bench systems and quickly get Plex going on that while I ordered a new NUC, because of this backup from Unraid to the Synology system. And then of course that data gets backed up again to the older Synology NAS, which will be off site. And all that magic happens through, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier in the video, but it happens through this app data backup add-on in Unraid. So this backs up all my containers. It stops them at 3 in the morning on either, I can't remember if it's Wednesday or Sunday. My Synology NAS does it 2 days a week. This does it once, and as far as I'm concerned, this is enough for me. And it also backs up the Unraid boot USB drive. So all the containers are backed up, all the data's, and I can quickly restore to any Intel device that has hardware acceleration to get Unraid going again. And I'm kind of losing track. So I think I'm good for any catastrophic event. The decision I have to make, though, is the backup strategy. So with a hyper backup on my backup NAS, even if I buy the new NAS, get rid of this and move the DS1520 into position, it's just drive migrations under Synology, which are supposed to be easy. That's one thing I haven't done yet. Well, say I'm running along fine with my new DS1825 Plus in my house. The DS1520 is the backup unit at my son's house. Everybody has a gig fiber connection. We're all just fine. And my house burns down while I'm not here. That locks me into buying another Synology NAS. If it's 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, maybe the proposition of continuing with Synology isn't as rosy as it is right now. Well, that makes me think, if I do buy the new DS1825 and migrate everything, once I'm up and running, I may want to wipe my hyper backup on my backup NAS and learn how to use rsync to do a one-to-one copy of the Plex media from the main Synology NAS to the backup one that will be off site by then, because then in the event of a catastrophic event, let's go back to the main Synology, I still have my, where is it? My Unraid containers backed up in the Unraid flash drive. I don't have to buy a new NAS I don't have to wait for my house to be rebuilt to then buy a new NAS or find a home for a new NAS while you're going through all the things about getting your life back in order after a catastrophic event. I can simply buy an inexpensive used Dell Optiplex, maybe a 9th gen Dell Optiplex or a little HP ProDesk like I have, and I can use that as the replacement Plex server at my son's house because, where am I here? I'm local again. Because my backup NAS is using rsync and, oh, that's the wrong folder. And it has this information right here that I can restore my unraid setup, including Plex server, at my son's house, and just change a few mount points to point it at the data on that backup NAS. And I'm telling you, within an hour and a half maybe, with my experience so far, I've got a Plex server running up for all my friends and family to still access, even though my house is burned down, it's not rebuilt yet, and I haven't repurchased a new Synology NAS to restore my main backup from. So that's where I'm leaning. I'm leaning towards getting away from hyper backup and using rsync to have a one-to-one copy, because the unraid information will already be on that backup, and I can restore that the fastest and the most inexpensively, even though there's only one copy of my data left after the catastrophic event. And pointing a media server or pointing the backup of your media server at your backup at somebody else's house isn't going to stress that and cause that to be unstable. So I'm not a professional YouTuber, so I may have covered things in a weird order, or I may have mentioned things multiple times. But again, in case of catastrophe, I can point a virgin Plex server at all my media. It will all scan in perfectly because I'm fully Plex compliant, even for hard media that doesn't match easily. My Plex settings allow the watch state to be restored no matter whose server I connect to, my server or your server. The UPS that's shared between Unraid and my primary Synology NAS makes sure that there's no Plex database corruption because of an unclean shutdown. I don't have any RAID issues. I don't have to have automatic data scrubbing run after an unclean shutdown on the Synology NAS, which are settings that you should have enabled too. So the UPS is a great protection mechanism, and there's a separate one on the backup NAS. RAID 6 or Synology Hybrid RAID 2 for 2-drive redundancy I think is necessary once you're over 4, 5, 6 drives, and then to have an automated backup system that is unintended is the final protection mechanism. And I'm even rethinking that because it makes more sense to have a direct copy than it does to have a proprietary backup, even though hyper backup is rock solid. I'm just assuming that rsync is probably as rock solid, and it's the cheaper option to restore quicker to have the one-to-one copy, because a little NUC running any OS could be pointed to that media to get a server up and running fast. But the Unraid component allows you to restore fully on an inexpensive device, to be right where you were when you left off. So I've just recapped everything because I never know how to end a video, and I'm ending the video now. Let me know what you think, and if you have any ideas that improves upon what I have and what I plan to do, I would appreciate hearing that. Happy Plexing.